Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 266 of Retropower Uncut. And we're not starting with an E-Type. I know we started with E-Type last week in the blast room, that's moved on now. And we have the new project in the works. Now you've seen it in the background and we've mentioned it briefly before, but this is Project Altabani, after the Mafia in the Italian job, and Mafia car in the Italian job, and we are starting the metalwork on the Fiat Dino. And Scott is taking this one on. Scott's going to run through with this one start to finish. He's been very keen to move on to a project where he's not picking it up part way through. And on this he's going to be doing it from the start, which I think he's pitched into one of the more complicated bits of the shell, and he's probably already regretting that statement. But yeah, he's pitched headlong. Obviously you can see now I ought to do a little rewind there really. Obviously the car has been blasted. We blasted this tail end of last week, but just after the video. You saw on video that we'd blasted the E-Type and zinc metal sprayed that. Well, once we'd finished doing the blasting work on that, we then cleaned up the blast room, put the grit through the shaker screen, recycled it, and then wheeled this in and got this on the rotisserie in there and blasted this. And there haven't been too many drastic surprises following blasting on this. It's more or less what we expected. A bit frilly around the edges, but not terminally terrible. But there are quite a few areas that have suffered a bit of bodging in the past and a bit of poor repair work, as you'd kind of expect on a car of this age. And Scott's pitched bravely into one of the most complicated bits that has suffered some bodging in the past, which is this corner area here, which is the confluence of many panels, all of which have had some bodge work. So he's cracking on with that and getting that all sorted out and put together. Now you'll be able to see a little bit more detail on this. We're going to kind of split things a little bit here. We're going to be able to see a bit more detail on this, and Scott himself talking about that a bit on our our behind the scenes channel, which will be on our for our club members. Obviously, I'm not going to skip over it completely here. We're kind of splitting things. I don't want to alienate our YouTube audience here, so we will still talk about what's going on. But basically, Scott's got into unpicking this area. But basically, before rewinding again slightly, I'm not getting my things in order very well here. He went over the whole body shell and basically marked up everything that he could see at a reasonably detailed glance that needed work. So there's a lot of Sharpie over the car now. All of the areas where he knows there's work to be done. Obviously, we'll find a bit more on the way. Now, we don't want to do anything that is going to be greatly affected by any slight tweaking of the chassis rails on this car, because we need to get it on a jig, and we don't have a jig free to put it on, and we know that one of the chassis rails is slightly out of alignment at the front. Nothing grossly out, but very slightly out at the front. So before we get into anything in that area, we want to get it onto the jig and get it measured up. However, the upper body areas are not going to be affected by that, and obviously there's a lot of panel sections to be made, because it's a fairly safe assumption we won't be able to buy anything for this car, so we're probably going to have to make pretty much all the repair sections. So as I say, Scott's then pitched bravely into this rear corner and started unpicking and started rewinding the history of poor repairs, and unpicking bits like this that have been repaired in the past and done badly. So he's got all these bits taken off. And he's starting to rewind the mists of time and get into for getting back as far as good metal, but that involves in this particular area here, this underside section, this top section that forms the bottom of the rear window aperture, this section which forms the side of the rear parcel shelf, if you like, the rear window aperture, which is rotten, the apertures for these grills, which I'm going to leave in now because that doesn't seem to come out very easily, but the rust has gone into there and it's been badly repaired. The rear window aperture is the wrong shape here, and there's actually some corrosion and damage and repair gone on inside the quarter panel here, so we're actually going to have to take the quarter panel apart, but he's going to take that apart under this grill so we can get the access in to repair that. And then slightly more challengingly, this rear window aperture up here has been repaired and not repaired very well. We're actually going to split that down here which is going to be tricky because it's going to cause some distortion down here, and the access is difficult, although we think we can get access through the rear window aperture. When we take out a section that needs repairing in the rear window aperture as well, we should be able to get at the back of that weld to repair that. And Scott has also just made up a tool in order to repair this section as well. So yeah, it's all progressing well. It's straight into a lot of detail work and straight into a lot of small sections that are quite involved to repair, and not just, oh, here's a great big panel to put on. I think he's quite looking forward to getting into some of the slightly later work, where it's going to be making some sections like these lower quarter panels. These need remaking complete, these lower quarter sections, both sides. So these will be a nice repair section to make to get his hand back in on panel shaping. Obviously, you're aware that you've seen Scott working here quite a bit now, and long-term viewers will be aware he worked for us in the past, but left for a couple of years. He moved to Aston Martin for a couple of years, has come back. Very welcome to have him back. Really good guy, and yeah, he wants to expand his skill set. He has done, obviously, since he started working for us properly. I mean, he did some work experience here and then started working for us. I can't remember if it was 18 or 19. I think he was 19 when he started working for us. So, you know, his progressions, he's come a long way. Been very, very quick learner and a very good guy. But yeah, I think quite looking forward to getting into doing some of the more complicated shaping work as well. So yeah, going to be an exciting journey. Scott's the man on this, and you'll be able to see this project evolve as we go. But yes, he's picked a particularly awkward corner to start with on that one. Moving on from that, we will go over to Bobby and some E-type doors. And on this, I'm going to hand over to Bobby this time, because I think you'd all quite like to hear from Bobby this week. So I asked him if he'd chat you through this, and he said he'd be happy to do that. So over to Bobby.
Hello from the metal shop again. Bob is with you, as usual. Right, so I'm still on the doors. I did all the mock-up earlier when the car was still on the lift before we sent it for the body prep. And then I had everything kind of mocked up and with temporary bracketry and all that, so I have all the geometries for different components. So now I kind of joined everything. I've been fabricating this plate where the window motor lives in, so it's bolting into this. Also the part of the adjustment of the window and the little rail here, which is giving you the adjustment side to side of the window again. So that's had to be cut and put a new plate here. Finished today these little recesses here, there for the future what do you call them? No, they're not a striker. They're the door locator, I would guess. I call them a door locating receiver on this thing. We got the mail on the B pillar, and this thing is bolted in here. So when you shut the door, the mail bit on the door, it's getting in very tight, so it stops the door from rocking up and down when the chassis is flexing. So that's going to be billet obviously later on. So yeah, I had to do that notch as well. Pretty much you got similar design across all two-door open top cars. They all have a little flex in the chassis, so this stops from the doors rocking up and down and keeps them in place, located. So I've been doing that and pretty much. What else? Some bosses here for threaded bump stop, so when the window goes all the way down, it will have physically stop against something, and we know that's the bottom position. And what's left to do is just in the front of the door. I have a hole where all the cables are going through and out in the A-pillar, and this obviously I came up with a design which is going to be a bended hard tube, so I have to make the mounting for this as well, and with that I think the doors will be pretty much kind of ready. So yes, that's what I've been doing so far, and yeah, I'll catch you on later on. Thank you very much.
So thank you for that, Bobby, and absolutely beautiful work. And we're going to move on to the E9 and go through what Stu's been up to on this. Because this is, again, slightly awkward for me to point at this job, but I'm going to climb up on the jig here and attempt to. Stu's working on the bulkhead area, the upper bulkhead area and the bulkhead sides at the moment on this. And he's tapping away, making up some corner sections at the moment, some slightly awkward shaped corner pieces to finish off this. But he's got the key bit that, I don't even know if, yeah, you probably can see actually, is that Luke had done, as I think he would have explained last week, the 3D printed, PLA 3D print trial sort of section for the blower intake, for the heater blower intake, which comes through here, very similar position to where the original came through. And then Stu has made the bulkhead section, or has made a chunk of the bulkhead section that allows that heater blower vent to come through for its air intake. As I say, this bulkhead will be completed all the way across. And sealed from the engine bay. There's a seal that sits on top of this section that will go all the way across there, which seals onto the bonnet so that the air intake for this heater comes from the bonnet vents into this area, under this shield. If I offer it up again, which I pretty much showed this last week, but basically that sits in there like that. So that shields the rainwater from going down into the heater intake, and the seal goes across the front of there and prevents the engine bay air from getting into your HVAC intake and making your air smelly in the car. So Stu is currently working on the complicated piece that finishes this section here off. And as you can see, that's quite it's an awkwardly shaped piece. And that's what he's tapping away in the background on at the moment, is that capping piece that's going to form the side of the scuttle inner area stroke bulkhead, which covers that area in and prevents the outside weather getting inside the car, and also sort of finishes the structure off in that area. And then also below that, he's been working on the mounting for the heater with a view to making it relatively easy to fit and unfit the heater, which is awkward because the fixing on one side of the heater, one side is fixed to the dash tube, but the rear side of the heater is attached to the bulkhead, and it's behind the heater, so you have to make the fixings accessible for fitting and unfitting the heater. So he's made a bracket where there's a tapered pin and a bolt, so that as you offer the heater up, it effectively hooks on a bit like a gate. So it kind of hooks onto a tapered pin, and then a bolt retains it on that tapered pin. And I think we'll probably put a little neoprene washer to stop any squeaks and rattles in there. But basically, it means you can hook the heater in and just do one bolt up, and that gets the forward side of the heater mounted, and then put the two bolts in that mount it to this dash tube. That mounts this side, and then it's all held in place. And then it will be additionally held in place by this vent, which is bolted, which bolts in to some studs that are welded into the bulkhead, and it will also be held in by all the various vents and things that are attached to the other end. So it's fairly solidly mounted once that's all in place. But as I say, they're quite fiddly to fit, these heaters, when you're actually at the assembly stage. So Stu's tried to think ahead a bit there and make it slightly easier for the assembly guys. And also the pipes are quite difficult to fit. So what we've done is made it so that, I think I mentioned before, we've got two loops of pipe that sit behind this vent underneath, behind the bulkhead. There'll be two loops of pipe that can be pre-fitted to the heater, and then with the heater resting on the floor, can be fitted to their outlets in the bulkhead, and then the whole heater can be lifted up with those loops of pipe attached, and they'll just slide up behind the heater blower. We can probably put a little bit of a bracket or something, we haven't finalised that bit yet, but basically something to stop them rattling around and moving around in there. And then it means that they make it relatively easy to get to do the connections, which would otherwise be quite hard to get to. And then the AC lines, again, they're slightly more accessible. Without the dash fitted, they are a little bit more accessible. Yeah, that's all coming together very nicely. Good progress on that. And the other progress on this, I'm going to let Luke talk about, because he's been working on, amongst many other things, has been working on getting the screen demist vents sorted out so that we can progress the dash metal structure a little bit further as well. So that's all coming along very well. I think you'll see the bulkhead next week. You'll probably see the bulkhead getting close to wrapped up, I would say, and that whole area getting close to being part of the car rather than a series of holes. So yeah, that's looking at very, very good indeed. At that point, I think we will move on to the Aston. And there's a few of us been working on the Aston. As I say, we have been working on this front valance this week. That's been the primary drive. Scott did a little bit of work at the beginning of the week on mocking up the wiper motor setup, just so that we could establish what needed doing in terms of the wiper motor, where it could be mounted, where it would work, where the geometry would work, etc, etc, etc. And he's got that roughed out, and we think that's okay. What we really need to do now is fit the windscreen and the actual wiper blades and arms and trial it like that to make sure the sweep's all correct and everything's working correctly there. We haven't done that yet because we've been working on this. We've been doing some body work. On the bench over there, Matt has just welded together the two ends and the base. Matt's been working on shaping. Matt's shaped the end and the base. Martin started on one of these, and then Martin's had a lot of other things to do. And then I've come down for a bit and actually done a bit of shaping as well. And shaped up, finished shaping that, made this, sits on there, that. It's not quite sitting on dead flush, but basically that sits on there. We've got to push the tops over on these. As I say, Matt's then done the other part of this, which he's got on the bench over there, all welded together now. So he's just in the midst. We've had to tell him to stop for a minute so it's not too noisy if you're doing the video, because he's tapping up the welds on that section now, and then he'll get that all clamped onto the book and then start cutting these. These are over length in all directions and not knocked over. So he'll then get onto these, finish shaping these up, get them all knocked over, get them all trimmed in, and then get all that lot welded together. And at that point, we have the new front valance ready to go for this car. So that's all good news. And then we'll be moving on to the rear valance, which I will let Luke talk to you about. But Luke has made great progress on that, and I can hear him now in the CNC router room, getting everything ready to go in there for machining all the parts for the book for the back. But I'll let him talk you through that. But yes, it's been an interesting time having a bit of a play on the English wheel again, because we don't do that much wheeling work here. And it's been quite good to get on and do a little bit of shaping work. It's not something, as I say, we don't do that much. We've done a lot of composite vehicles recently, so we haven't been doing that much shaping, and it's quite nice to get back onto it. But we're all a bit rusty on it, so it's been a bit of a refresher course. For us, but it's coming along. As I say, this part is quite complicated. This front section, in that it's got this what would be called a reverse curve. Again, I might do a more detailed dive on this as a sort of background video for the club. But briefly, for now, there's a reverse through the middle of this. It's called a reverse curve, where the panel is curved that way, and the curves are opposed to each other, and that makes the part reasonably difficult to make. It makes it quite tricky to make. As you can see, ignore the fine detail because this isn't finished yet, but that you can see you've got a curve that way there and a curve that way there, and they're reversed to each other. And what you do to create that is you basically put a bend in the initial sheet that way, and then you stretch the sides of that bend, which pushes the curve over that way. The difficulty is doing that without putting unnecessary curvature into this area here when it's quite a long part like that, and that is quite tricky. You have to keep wheeling off the edge. You have to keep operating off the edge of the part and keep stretching the edge to let any shape in here away out from the edge, to keep that as flat as it needs to be to conform to the book. These are actually pretty good, they're pretty close, but it's quite a lengthy process, because the amount of wheeling on this edge is quite substantial to get enough stretch in that to put the curvature that you need in that area there. So it is, I was explaining to somebody the other day, people refer to it as a black art. It's not a black art, it is a science. But sometimes it's easy to get lost in the science and convince yourself it's a black art part way through just because it's a bit complicated. And at a couple of points we were starting to question our sanity on this because of this, getting this unnecessary material in the middle. As I say, the solution is generally just more wheeling and keep stretching the part and keep stretching the part and keeping the stretch in the right places to make sure the shape's doing what you want it to do. I'm sure Jamie's got plenty of B-roll of all of that wheeling going on, all of Matt's hammering on the sandbag, on the shop bag, and all of the jobs to do with making this part to the correct shape. As I say, that reverse curve carries on into these ends, and they were particularly tricky because there's a combination combination of an enormous amount of stretch in this area. We split this part, the ends are made up to about there, and there's an enormous amount of stretch in that area there, and quite a lot of shrink in that area there to get the shape. You can imagine the metal needs to shrink in that area and stretch substantially in that area, and in order to get that, the material ended up too thin here, so we had to make them in two pieces. Matt made the initial one in two pieces. I had a go at shaping the other end in one piece, but we just ran out of material thickness in this area. We started with 1.5 mil and we were down to 0.7 mil probably in this area, just too thin. So we had to split it anyway. So Matt split it anyway and made that piece separately just because we just ran out of material thickness. So it's interesting again, the learning experiences. Some people would know, who have more experience than us probably, would know straight away, yeah, you just won't be able to get that. I was fairly convinced we could, and we couldn't quite, so there we go. But yeah, I think that's probably enough of me waffling on about all that. The other area of progress is in the body shop in here, where Gaz has been getting onto the E-Type and getting onto all the cleaning up and prep of all the steel surfaces that can't be blasted, of which there are quite a lot on this car, because there's quite a lot of A-surface areas that will be final paint, that will be A-surface paint, where we were very cautious about putting the blaster. We didn't really want to cause any distortion, because there's a lot of surfaces that have taken quite a long time to get to the stage they're at. So Gaz has spent a long time carefully DA sanding, using phosphoric acid metal prep on all the surfaces to make sure there's no corrosion remaining there, and then re-sanding, and a lot of prep work on all the outside surfaces, and then doing all the cleaning up and tidying up and preparation underneath to then get all the seam sealer applied underneath to all of the seams. So every single lap joint and every single gap is then sealed underneath, and then the sealer's wiped in and pushed in and then cleaned off and wiped off, which is quite tricky and a bit awkward because the zinc leaves quite a rough surface, which is good for a key for any further coatings, but is also a good key for any cloth that you then use to try and wipe the sealer in and off, and it then tends to pull lint out of the cloth, and it's a bit of a pain basically. So it's quite a time-consuming process to do neatly. We used to have a sealer that was brilliant for this, called 3M Drip Check Heavy, but for various reasons, something to do with chemicals and emissions and things, I imagine, it's no longer available in the UK, and we cannot get it from anywhere. That would save us an enormous amount of time, because that was a material that would go into all of those seams, seal them perfectly, and not need wiping out, not need finishing. It just sort of sank in to the seams, and it was brilliant stuff. But it's not available now, so we have to do it the hard way. We know of, if anybody knows of an equivalent to 3M Drip Check Heavy, that would be great, but I don't think there is one, because we've exhaustively investigated. But yeah, if somebody's got a bright idea, it would be great to hear. Gaz would be very glad if we've all spent a long time trying to find a source for such a thing, but it's a bit frustrating that we can no longer get it, because it would make this stage of the job a lot quicker and a lot neater and a lot easier. But yeah, that's where we're at on E-Type, is getting all the underside sealing all done, and then it'll be further prep on the inside and getting everything ready for its first coat of epoxy primer, prior to then all of the external surface prep. I think at that point it's a good time to hand over to Cal, I think, and let him take you through the assembly shop.
Thank you very much, Nat. And we're going to start with a Roundstone coffee. And actually, what I've not mentioned before is that this Whisper Quiet coffee machine is also from Roundstone. So Roundstone have kind of two arms to their business. One is actually the coffee roastery, which I'm excited to say we're going to actually go down there and show you a video of the place. But their kind of sister business is Roundstone Vending, which do the coffee machines, and actually the vending machine like we've got out there, which I'll show you in a minute. But yes, it's worth keeping in mind if you, particularly if you are a business owner and wondering about installing some very nice coffee machines like this one, which I'll dwell on for a sec, because it is actually a bean to cup machine. So you put the coffee beans in the top, it has the grinder built in, grinds the beans, puts them into the little tamper. It's actually really cool inside, and one of the bits I always think is very cool is the tea making part of this machine, which has got like a little conveyor I'm going to say made out of teabag material. It's not, it's much stronger than that. But basically, it's a conveyor made out of like a fine strainer. And you fill it with loose tea, and it basically pours the loose tea onto that, and then obviously the boiling water through it. And then it does a little sort of pause while it brews, then does another second go, and then the conveyor basically then just winds the used tea leaves off the end into a bin underneath. It's actually a really clever bit of kit. Anyway, this is not Retropower coffee machines, is it? What am I doing? Let's go and have a little look and chat about what's going on. So, actually, first thing I'm going to dwell on is the club. So, the last few episodes I've been kind of building up to the launch of the Retropower Club, and we opened up membership for subscription on Sunday at 6 p.m. and almost ridiculously, we sold out what we've called the OG 100, the first 100 memberships, in just over 24 hours. So congratulations if you were one of those people that managed to get into the OG 100. Very excited to see you at our club events and the OG 100 launch party on the 17th of Jan. If you didn't, don't worry, you can still get into a standard membership. There's also a priority tier, which is a little bit more expensive, but basically means you get notified of events a little bit sooner. So when they're limited number of events, you've got a greater chance of getting onto those events. So yeah, very excited to see where that journey is going to take us. Also, another thing I wanted to talk about was merch. So I mentioned last week we have had a big restock. So we've got these core line, we're going to call them, hoodies and t-shirts, which we're keeping holding stock of. We've also got keyrings back in stock. We've got beanies in stock from before. We've got the Den bobble hats, which are very, very cool. A couple of people mentioned them in the videos, and they've been selling like hotcakes. And then actually over time now, we're going to be introducing quite a lot of other merch designs. So actually, if you've got any ideas for something you would like us to sell as a merch item, put it in the comment below. But with those, we're going to do limited runs of everything. So when we come up with an idea, we will do probably 1 or 2 items just so we can wear them and show them and make sure we're happy with them. And then we'll take pre-orders for either a given amount of time or maybe for a certain number of items, and then get them all made together. So we don't have to hold the stock or take so much risk on getting designs made in all sorts of different sizes and then maybe not actually being able to sell them. So yes, watch this space on the expansion of the merch. However, if you want one of the core line t-shirts, which are really good quality, and the hoodies, again, we've just gone all out this time with our merch, and the focus is literally just quality. We've not really considered the price of what they're costing us. We just wanted them to be the best they could be. So yeah, if you want these, go on the shop now, and we're actually doing a little offer for December. So if you buy merch from our merch shop during the course of December, you're going to be entered into a raffle, and the winner of that raffle will win a free OG 100 membership. So we held back one membership. Membership number 99 has not been issued, and we're going to give that with a lifetime free membership to one person picked at random from the people who have bought merch during the course of December. So get on the shop and buy some merch. Looking at this vending machine, this is actually, I mentioned it a second ago, this is also from Roundstone, and you can see from this selection of products why everyone here is so trim and what's the word, Jamie?
Svelte.
Svelte. That's a very good one. Our svelte physiques. Right, let's have a little look over here. So into the workshop, past this insanely cool Camaro, which from this angle with the bonnet open is probably one of the best looking cars I've ever seen. And onto these rather dilapidated looking Recaro CSE seats. Now I'm going to invite another comment on this one. So these are kind of period 80s, maybe even crept into late 70s, but certainly 80s seats. And they were the sort of Recaro option for slightly more luxury cars, where you wanted the sporty bolster support, but a little bit more width, a little bit more comfort and electric adjustment. And what I'm going to ask is, based on the fact that these are destined for a future Retropower project that's not arrived yet, what project do you think that's going to be? It's one that I'm very, very excited about. I'm kind of, I suppose if my favourite era of cars is probably 80s stuff, if anything, slightly later 80s stuff. And this for me is going to be like a dream car build for me. I have to say a lot of the cars are really a dream car builds for me. But I think for me, this would be one that I would daily. I'd love it, just even if it was my only car. I think it would be a great choice. So yeah, very exciting project. We'll reveal all in due course. But if you want to have a guess as to what we might be building as a full Retropower project with Recaro CSEs in, then yeah, stick your comments down below. On that note, I'm going to hand over to the CAD den, which is probably only going to be Luke today because George seems to have lost his voice. So we'll hand over to Luke and see what he's been up to in the CAD lair.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the CAD Cave, powered by Hope, Dreams and Biltong. In this week's video, we're going to be touching on a couple of different areas. Starting off in the assembly workshop, Churchill. Ages ago, I've been 3D printing all these different roof trim prototypes. I then got super busy with a plethora of other things and kind of just needed to glue all that together and kept gluing it together like day by day. And yesterday, actually went in and test fitted them all in the car. So I'm really happy with how they turned out. They look very OEM, way better than what the factory ones would have done. The wood trims that already came into it, and they're going to slot together really nicely and kind of form a very nice finishing piece to that interior. So very, very, very happy with that. And we'll obviously give you guys a little bit of footage to see that as well. And then the other thing, the smaller thing that I've been doing this week, I think I touched on this last week as well, was the E9 fan housing. Predominantly everything is staying the exact same as what you guys would have seen last week. I've just been working hand in hand with Stu to make minor adjustments based off of his very sound advice from the fact that he's done this 4 billion times before. So just how it mounts up to the upper scuttle. Okay, you can make this a little bit wider. We've got room for a bit more beef here to support it. All those small things which kind of just make the end product a lot better than what it would have been when I first gave it to him. And then in conjunction with that as well, whilst he's working on that bulkhead scuttle area, I've also done the demist vents, because the original E9 is quite funny where you can kind of see they had the vent and they put it in and then it probably didn't fit too well. So what they've done is they've gone, just cut that out and make it fit. And so where you've got land around the vent opening for about 80% of it to actually sit onto, as it tapers towards the back, you start to lose that land, and then right at the back you've literally just got a knife edge, and so there's nothing for it to clamp onto. So we knew that we were going to have to refabricate that anyway. So what me and Nat decided end of last week is that I'll get that scanned and I'll actually make the design for that vent, and then Stu can basically work around that design, make it super simple for him. He knows this needs to fit in this area, he knows it needs to have a certain level of land around it, and then he can make that fit all bang tidy. So as always, it's an absolute pleasure working with Stu, because he just knows what he wants, and so I can implement that really quickly and get that done. And then moving on to something very, very exciting, I actually machined out the rear end buck for the Aston Martin. So I'm going to hand down to a much dirtier and dustier version of myself from yesterday. So let's see what he has to say. Thank you. Thank you very much, upstairs Luke. Now it's time for downstairs Luke. We are here with the buck that you guys would have seen at the end of last week, finally actually coming together in a really, really nice way. Behind me just here is the corners and lower section, which Matt has done a bloody fantastic job on, welding them up, smoothing them out, and you can kind of start to see the shape that we would have seen in those renders that you would have seen 2 weeks ago now coming into fruition a little bit. So now he's just kind of cracking on with that front section, last 2 front sections to go, weld it all together, and then we can start fitting that to the car. Mega super exciting. And then the next stage on this build, the thing that I've kind of been working on over the last week, I'd say, last couple of days, is moving on to the front to the rear end. So end of last week, I think in last week's video, you guys would have seen the rough design of what the car is going to look like. From that point, we then sent that to the client. He asked for a couple different variations of exhaust height, and we basically landed back where we were anyway. But that happens quite a bit. It's you got to flesh out ideas and see if they're going to work. Not all of them will, but either way, we're all really happy with what the car's looking like. And so the reason why I'm very dusty today is that I've actually machined out all the parts of the rear end block now. this I perfected the program from the first one, and it was really satisfying because when I finished, it had maybe 0.1 mil left of the actual material, so all of them really nicely popped out of the board itself. But yeah, so these are the wooden parts. There's also going to be a completely solid printed carbon nylon print for the exhaust shape. That means that can actually be used as a hammer form for when they're making it. And then similar to the front end one, the more complex areas are going to be 3D prints, so they can very accurately mimic the shape of what we have in CAD to metal itself. So yeah, stay tuned to possibly even see this be constructed in this week's video. I'm not too sure yet because we're filming this on a Wednesday. But yeah, hopefully you'll get to see that very soon. Thank you very much, guys.
What you need to say is George has been working on the scimitar like a boss. And that's about it.
So, as you just saw, my colleague, the bloke from The Godfather, just said, George, who's not going to be doing his parts of video this week because he genuinely can probably say about 5 words maximum before literally dying, has been still working on scimitar and on some really cool stuff. He's at the point now which I think when people who aren't really involved with cars or car design think about designing a car, this is the part that they imagine. This is the fun part where you get to fill in the gaps with where your indicator's going to sit, how your bumper's going to look, how's the front end going to look, all these different things which have such a massive part of the car. And when you have the end product, people look at it and go, that's a really cool design, that's a really cool idea. That's the part that George is on currently, so just stay tuned, because I think the best thing to do with this is if you guys got little hints throughout it, and then you got to see the whole end product, you guys are going to be like, that is not only the coolest scimitar I've ever seen, but I really want one, because I really want one. And so yeah, stay tuned for that, because this car is going to be absolutely insane. So thank you very much, guys, and we will see you next week.
Okay, thank you very much, Luke. And don't forget to go over and check out the other video that we've just dropped of what's going on down at the den. If you want to sign up to the club, please go and do that now. If you want merch in time for Christmas, please go onto the website and order that now as well. And we will see you again next week. So these are Recaro CSEs, and they're a ridiculously cool seat from the 80s, and they were generally fitted into cars where you wanted that kind of Recaro quality of seat. What the fucking hell are you doing, you absolute mong? Yeah, although this reinforces my fact about the svelte characters around here. He's so desperate for snacks, he can't even wait until I finish doing my video. He's like, oh, go get me snacks out, give me the snacks.
Stood there for half an hour. All right.
It's a good outtake.